Let's go.
Welcome, everyone, to Zephyr's Adjusted for Risk podcast. This is Ryan Nauman, the market strategist here at Zephyr. As you all probably know, the Wealth Management Edge conference is fast approaching on June 10th through the 12th, and the excitement is building for the premier wealth management event of the year. Well, I have on a very special guest to talk about the Edge conference, the conference industry as a whole, and some of the trends that are going on in the wealth management space. But before we get started, this episode is sponsored by the award-winning Zephyr, which helps investment professionals make more informed investment decisions. My next guest, he doesn't need much of an introduction, but here it is. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to David Armstrong. David is the Executive Director, Content and User Engagement Editorial at wealthmanagement.com. He is also host of the very popular RIA Edge podcast. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. It's really an honor to have you on. We've worked a lot together for many years now, and I've always really enjoyed our conversations about the industry. So I'm really excited about this one. And as we talked a little bit before we went live here, I'm putting you in the hot seat. Usually you're on this side of the microphone, so we've changed it up a little bit. So I'm excited about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and wealthmanagement.com?
Sure. Well, first of all, Ryan, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it. I am very uncomfortable being on this side of the question and answer. I'm usually the one asking the questions, and I'm more comfortable in that position. But thanks for asking me to be here. My name is David Armstrong. I have been the content head at Informa Connects Wealth Management.com and Trust and Estates for probably about 12 years now. I joined when it was still owned by a company called Penton and publishing Registered Rep magazine. Registered Rep magazine, as some of you may remember, it was the magazine that was sent to anyone who had a Series 7 stockbroker license. You got Registered Rep back in the day. The folks that I worked for and who hired me at Penton had bought the URL for wealthmanagement.com probably about 10 years prior to hiring me. They had sat on it. They knew where the trends in the industry were going, kind of away from transactional wealth management sales towards more holistic financial planning. New wealth management was the kind of term of art. Bought that URL for not very much money at all. I think, not even $100, I don't believe at the time. And sat on it for about 10 years until they decided to launch wealthmanagement.com, roll Registered Rep into wealthmanagement.com. That's when I came on board to help launch that online first. And then we changed the magazine over from Registered Rep magazine to Wealth Management magazine. And here we are.
I love that story. Registered Rep, that really brings back some memories from way back. In my early days, getting that magazine and stuff, and fantastic memories of yesteryear, right?
Yeah.
But great evolution. And speaking of evolution, talking about media and content, the evolution of conferences. Oh my goodness, before it was primarily user conferences or maybe investor conferences put on by mutual fund companies. In fact, that is really how I landed at Zephyr years ago. I attended the Zephyr user conference in Tahoe years ago, and loved what Zephyr was doing, the people, and of course, Tahoe. And here I am working for Zephyr, living in Tahoe. But now those conferences really are events like Edge. It's more of an event and much, much more. Can you tell us a little bit more about that evolution where we're at today?
Yeah, I think it's definitely true. We do not lack from, we don't have a lack of conferences in the wealth management space, that's for sure. I think from the media perspective, we're very much like any other media company, B2B media company out there, in that struggles with the same kind of challenges that all publishers and media companies struggle with. Events kind of fill a nice hole in the space. Some people call them live journalism, right? It's a great opportunity to get people in your community together. People still enjoy coming out to events. People like to attend in person. I think what's happened in our space is that there has been, as you say, the user conferences, which continue to this day. right? And they are dynamic and larger and very well entrenched conferences from some of the platforms out there. Most notably the custodians, right? I mean, Schwab's conference every year is the big behemoth, and that's practically a trade show at this point. I think that there is space for the way that conferences are going for is much like sort of the wealth management industry in and of itself. There's going to be a few large scale, big conferences that just try to appeal everyone, everything, everybody, and then maybe more kind of smaller scale, more niche focused, hyper focused, maybe narrower in scope, but deeper in subject matter
Yep.
expertise around any of the activities or areas you want to consider in wealth management, whether that's technology or investments or growth strategies or any of the alternative investing, ETFs still. I mean, those conferences are still around. There's a conference for everybody for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, there really are. It's I don't, and we're going to talk about it short. I'm not really sure how a financial advisor at some point, kind of tries to determine when they set out their year calendar, which one they go to, how they decide where they go to. And we're going to talk about that shortly. But, kind of goes along with that line, markets are very uncertain, they're volatile. And we often talk, like at Zephyr about communication. Communication is so important between financial advisor and client. And now, especially during times of uncertainty, and I wouldn't call it chaos or crisis, but we're, uncertain markets. Why should people in the wealth management space continue to go to conferences, especially during this market uncertainty? It's got to be hard for them to get away from the office for a week to go to a conference when markets are volatile and their phone is ringing.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think the motivation to go to a conference, particularly one like I think Wealth Management Edge, which has a kind of built in a lot of time for networking or taking business calls or this kind of thing. You don't need to really go off the map to be
Mhm.
at this conference. You can still be involved in your business and still attend the conference. I think the market volatility may hold some advisors back, although I would suggest that many financial advisors, particularly in the independent wealth management space, are increasingly, I think, a little bit maybe less embroiled in the day-to-day markets.
Mm.
Their job is really about client management, and so they are, attempting to, as you say, craft messages for their clients, which
Yeah.
put them at ease with the long-term goals of their portfolios, and not necessarily sitting there on the Bloomberg terminal all day, hitting the buy/sell button, depending on whether the market's up or down on a particular day. Most financial advisors I know don't do that sort of thing anymore. Um, so, market volatility is certainly a thing that clients ask about. It's certainly a thing that they need to be engaged with and be able to communicate to their clients what they're doing around the market volatility or how it's impacting their portfolios or their long-term financial plans. But it's no longer, I think, the chain to the terminal that they need to, be glued to from, what is it, 9:30 to 4:30 every day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Very good point. And, I often, say too with these conferences, yes, maybe it's away from your desk, but it's not like we're going somewhere where you're going to be off the grid.
Yeah.
There's still going to be technology there. Also, it's a great time, with this market volatility and uncertainty to learn about it. So when you do go back to the office, you have, maybe different talking points. You can have a different message. You learn from hear from some of the great minds in the industry about what's going on. So to me, it's a great way of learning more about what's going on so you can help educate or communicate with your client.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's those kind of lessons from the stage for sure, but
Yeah.
also just the serendipitous conversations that advisors have and with other advisors in the hallways. The quality of advisor that we get at Wealth Management Edge is pretty high. I mean, we have a bunch of C-suite executives, decision makers at kind of fast-growing RIA firms, some of the investment officers from some of these firms, the technology folks from some of these firms. They they have ideas, right?
Mhm.
They don't all need to be taught how to talk to their clients, but there are certainly other advisors there that maybe just in a conversation with them will pick up an idea or a
Yeah.
thought or a data point or some kind of way of presenting information that is a little bit different. And yeah, absolutely, I think that those kind of serendipitous discoveries and lessons are what make going to a conference worthwhile.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. It's a networking and meeting um, with individuals and just talking to other people out there in the industry, getting ideas. You talked about just, few, earlier in the conversation about all the different conferences, whether it's more of an industry-wide conference, very large conference, or a user-based conference, or more of a niche conference. There's a lot of them out there. But with limited time and resources, how can, wealth managers decide which conference to go to? Do you have any tips there? I know obviously you might be biased to Edge, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, like everything else, I think advisors just need to be intentional about this. What are they looking to get out of the conference experience? If they're a brand new advisor, just coming into wealth management and maybe starting to learn, I think that could determine like some conferences that you go to that maybe are geared a little bit more towards the broad swath of basic wealth management and basic industry information. If you're more of a senior level advisor and you're growing a firm that requires you to be as much of a kind of a business decision maker as much as a financial advisor, there are conferences that I think I put wealth management in this camp that are a little bit more along the lines of, business advice for people growing businesses, right?
Mhm.
The business of financial advice is really what we cover, and and that's what we're trying to talk about there. So it won't be a ton of here's how you explain market volatility to your clients, but rather hearing from other executives at RIA firms who have maybe segmented their clients in a different kind of way and tailored different messages for each type of client and how that works for them and what they spend on the technology to make that happen and whether or not they hire a CMO or not hire a CMO or use an outsourced CMO. These are the kind of questions I think the advisors with a little bit more tenure, a little bit more track
Yeah,
record in the industry are trying to answer.
yeah. Great insight there. You talked about, how you get value from attending a conference. You mentioned that, and it costs money for a financial advisor to go to these conferences.
Some some of them cost
Yeah,
money. Some of them
yeah.
will support you to go. Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. Um, can you provide some tips to attendees on ways to get the most value out of like attending a conference like Edge? Is it meeting, networking, attending the sessions, or doing some of the activities like kayaking?
I mean, again, there's a lot of great activities going on down there. The kayaking, like you mentioned, and there's a charity golf tournament I think that OPL is putting on. Yeah, there's a lot of good activities like that. And again, I think it's the intention, right? What are you looking to get out of this conference? If you're looking for networking and those kind of serendipitous meetings with like-minded advisors that maybe could lead to further conversations or just spark an idea or get a nugget of information that's useful, maybe those kind of networking events are the way to go. Spend as much time as you can talking to as many people as you can, and worry a little bit less about the content going on the stage. But if if you look over the agenda and there's some very good folks on the stage, and something registers there, and you think that it would be useful for you in your practice, certainly, make
Mhm.
your schedule, go for it. I think maybe advisors make the mistake of trying to go to everything,
Okay.
and that's just that'll just drive you nuts, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to cover every single thing that's going on at the conference to get value out of it. I think you're better off being very intentional about what you're looking for and
Okay.
kind of marking those areas off and focusing on those. And then the other stuff that falls into place just in between falls into place, and it will likely be useful and good, but set out with an intention to do the top two or three things that you really want to see and hit.
Yeah. That's interesting because especially, at Edge, you guys have the content is fantastic. And you have the different pillars and I was just going through it a couple of weeks ago when, learning that where I'm attending and what sessions do I want to go to? And it was like, oh my gosh, there's so many. How in the world do I choose from it? But I had to be more selective, so my takeaways. And up here in Tahoe, Dave, we have kayaking. We have a Great Lake. We have hiking and all this stuff. Golf. When are you going to move the conference to Tahoe?
Yeah, I
How
think we
about
should.
everything that Boca has? Boca
I
Raton,
think we should do
Tahoe.
it. You have my vote. I would do that in a heartbeat. I would I would do it. I would do it in the winter out there. I would go
There
skiing. I
you
would do a skiing conference. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we could host a podcast on the chairlift
That would be
between
great. I would
runs.
do it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Think of a good name for that one. What would it? I don't know what it would be. Sky Talks or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Something.
there we go. The chairlift musings or something
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that. Yeah.
In the chair
Um,
with Ryan Nauman.
yeah, exactly. Speaking of sessions, what are some of the sessions that you're most looking forward to?
Yeah, I think obviously this year there's a lot of talk around private equity,
Yeah.
not just in terms of private equity being the kind of fuel that's facilitating a lot of the M&A that's happening in the wealth management industry, but alternatives as an investment class for financial advisors to open up for their clients. We've heard a lot about the democratization of
Yeah.
alternatives. I'm still a little bit skeptical. I mean, it still seems to me that this is something that the asset management industry is coming up with to promote rather than advisors really needing to buy for their clients. But I'm open. I mean, I understand it's the notion that there's probably half as many investable equities on the public markets today as there was however many years
Yeah.
ago. That world's shrinking. More value creation in companies is happening outside of the public markets. That's definitely true. So I understand the appeal for alternatives to get clients access to some of that value creation. Um, and just the way that it happens is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see more about that. And I know we're going to have KKR there. I think Apollo is going to be there,
Yeah.
Blackstone. There's going to be a lot of players from the private equity world to hopefully can give us some answers.
Yeah, that's a good one. On the podcast, I have a lot of folks on the private equity or alternative space coming on, and it is really interesting. Well, I think I'm a firm believer that, helping you don't want to flood financial advisors with products and overwhelm them, but the more products that you can potentially offer your clients to help them achieve their goals, the better, right? And private equity alternatives can definitely help when it's done right. I know on my side, first thing I do when I look at the agenda is look at the investment pieces, as I'm more on the investment side. But you guys have some great content, and then on the ETF side, those active ETFs, Dave, are just blowing up. I again have a lot of people on the ETF side on the podcast, and to me, could be a lot of landmines there in terms of some of these really exotic ETFs, and I love learning more about those, and maybe kind of the new products and trends out there. I know Cameron Dawson, somebody who I follow a lot, is going to be on a panel. She's great. And then of course you have Shannon's conversation with Alex Smith. Um,
Yep, that'll
that'll
be
be
good. I think that's our
fun.
opening keynote. Yeah, it's at the opening
Yeah.
day keynote. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good ones, of fixed income space, and there's a topic on the tariffs, international investing. So
Mhm.
um, I know
Yeah,
I'm going to be busy.
yeah, no, for sure. On the investing side, there is a lot. This was the old Inside ETFs conference that you referenced. Was sort of the progenitor of Wealth Management Edge in a way. Informa inherited that conference
Yeah.
or acquired that conference, and it kind of bounced around a little bit into some different divisions. It sits with us now, and I think our thinking at the time was that this is a great conference. It certainly gets the ETF industry involved. They kind of consider it their conference, which is great. They need a conference.
Yeah.
I think what was maybe missing a little bit was the advisor piece.
Yeah.
And so, trying to build the Inside ETFs conference with two other pillars that advisors are interested in, which one would be the business of financial advice and business growth, and how do I design and build a practice, growing, successful practice for my stakeholders, family,
Yep.
colleagues, clients, everyone. And also the technology components, right? The technology is constantly changing in the space. We've all seen the Kitsus technology map. We all know the 300, 400, different firms that create technology specifically for this industry.
Yeah.
That's a minefield to navigate as well. I mean, how do you start? So, bringing those three things, investment tools, business growth, and technology together under one roof was kind of a way to, lure more advisors in, more advisory
Mhm.
teams in, and kind of let them sort of choose their own path,
Yep.
choose their own adventure through the content. Uh, but I think it's been successful. We've gotten good feedback on it. I spend most of my time in the RIA Edge section of the
Yep.
conference, where the business growth discussions take place. But the technology is really exciting. You mentioned Shannon Rossick. She's doing some great stuff on the wealth tech stage. There's tech tours, sort of curated tours of some of the technology vendors that are there with some experts, which is a useful way to see some of that stuff that's going on. And then on the investment side, yeah, as we've discussed, the ETF issues are there. I think when we were talking about inside ETFs and kind of changing it over to wealth management edge, the thinking was that ETFs, while yes, there is still a lot more innovation to happen in ETFs,
Yep.
in a way that puzzle's kind of been solved, right? I mean, sure, there's a little more stuff to go on in the edges of the ETF world for sure. Um, but if it's down to, why an ETF instead of a mutual fund, I think we've solved that one. I
Yeah.
think, that's not. So it struck me that, these are investment wrappers. And I think maybe what advisors are more interested in talking about are the investment strategies. And then whatever wrapper they use to get at that strategy is the wrapper they use, whether it's an SMA maybe, or a, mutual fund or a
Yeah.
ETF. But the strategies are important. So I think a lot of the investment conversations are around those lines.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. I think at this point, people really know the difference between mutual fund ETFs, the benefits, drawbacks between them, or separately managed accounts, right? Now it's more about, like you said, the strategies within those wrappers. Let's talk a little bit about trends. You mentioned you talked about private equity, we talked about ETFs, some hot topics there in the wealth management space. AI, right?
Yeah.
M&A also a lot of big trends there. What are some other hot trends that you're hearing in all your talks with the industry folks that maybe aren't related to AI, maybe something different than AI that we always hear about?
Yeah, I'm M&A obviously, but let's set that aside for a bit. In terms of what advisors deal with on a day-to-day uh, uh, life, I still don't think that many of them have fully absorbed the possibilities around the marketing rules, the new marketing rules that are available to them, in terms of
Mhm.
testimonials and being able to, how do you leverage
Yeah.
your client reviews publicly. It seems like a great opportunity for a lot of advisors who are trying to grow a practice. I think they still kind of struggle with it a little bit,
Yep.
how to do that easily. So I think we'll be talking about that a little bit there. And the other one that I'm just kind of interested in is the private equity in the investment portfolio, and going back and forth between these two notions of the what we're talking about before, the wealth manager as being not the investment management person, right? They're
Yep.
the life coach, the psychologist, the client relations person. The investments is sort of that has been solved. That's the basket of diversified ETFs, low cost. Solve that one. So now we can just talk about client psychology and legacy and all that sort of thing. Versus now, I think what's happening is with the private equity coming into the space, more of the investment portfolio as a differentiator for financial advisors.
Yeah.
5 years ago, that was not the conversation, right? You were not meant to differentiate yourself around your portfolio. That was always looked at a little skeptically. Now, I think with more options, investment options for advisors, fewer in the publicly traded realm, more private. That's a legitimate claim, I think, and I think there are some advisory firms that are kind of trying to really make their investment portfolio the differentiator, right?
Mhm.
Otherwise, everyone's low-cost Vanguard diversified ETFs pool looks exactly like the next advisor's low-cost diversified Vanguard ETF. You know, uh, using investments as a differentiator, I think is going to be a hot topic that's going to come up.
Yeah, that's interesting because we in our talks with financial advisors, as ever, it's a lot about these younger generation of investors, and I say younger, but it's all generations now. They want more transparency from their investments. They want them customized. So you're right, like a basic portfolio of low cost ETFs, vanilla ETFs with maybe just a different allocation mix. How much does that really enhance the client experience and make them happy? Not so much. So it's, what else can you add to differentiate yourself? Is it by adding Bitcoin or crypto,
Mhm.
private equity? So as a financial advisor, it feels if it's makes your job a lot more difficult because you got to learn about all these different products in order to talk about them.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely true. And even if you don't want your clients in them, right? Or if you don't recommend your clients be in them, your clients will ask about them,
Yeah,
and you have to be able to talk intelligently about them. So yeah, absolutely, it's an
yeah.
ongoing education for sure.
Dave, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure.
It was a lot of fun. As always, all of our conversations we've had are fun. Did not disappoint. Thank you so much for joining and sharing such great insight. Can't wait to have a beer with you at Boca Raton. It's going to be fun. Where can our audience get more information about Wealth Management Edge?
Well, you can go to wealthmanagement.com and go to the events tab there on the site, and that'll bring you right to all of our events, Wealth Management Edge, RIA Edge, our awards, the Wealth Management Industry Awards. So you can find the information there. Just Google Wealth Management Edge 2025, and it'll pop up. It's the first one that pops up. It's on the Informa website, so it's there. It's easy to find.
Yep. And for all those of you that are attending Edge, you'll see Dave running around. Um, busiest guy there running around.
I'm like
But
the guy on the stage, like the line, bringing people on and off, doing the, that's my,
important job though.
yeah,
Important
yeah.
job. Spearheading all that. So
Make sure nobody trips on the stairs.
yeah,
That's my role.
exactly. Awesome, Dave. Thank you so much. I'll see you in a couple weeks. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Zephyr's Adjusted for Risk podcast. You can watch all of our other episodes on the Zephyr YouTube channel and Spotify. Also, please be sure to subscribe and follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you and have a great rest of your week.
Ryan, thanks very much. Appreciate it.